Welcome back to Second Chance MTG. This is going to be our second edition of Deck Tech. It's going to be Legacy Deck Tech, and it's certainly going to be a fun one today. We're going to be talking about a similar deck tech to our first one that we did a little while ago. Today is going to be talking about Red Green Burn, and this is my mix, my little spiced version of this deck. I have a lot of fun with it. I also call this deck Revel in the Burn, more or less not me, but my opponents, because they always say, well, why is that in the burn? And so that's pretty much the nickname that this deck inherited based on the fact of why people wonder why certain cards are in the deck. So let's go ahead and dive right in to the beginning of this deck. Now we're going to start off with 3 damage spells section. When you want to play burn, you always want to start off with this simple rule of 3. 3 damage spells is what you're aiming for in burn, and so we're going to look at the first unanimous spell that is played always as a 4 of in burn. It's Lightning Bolt, 3 damage to target creature or player, and of course you always want to aim for directly to the face, unless it's a really unique situation where the creature is posing a problem, and it doesn't hurt to have alpha Lightning Bolts if you can afford them. And so let's go ahead and dive right in. The second card that we're going to always have if you're going to be playing Legacy Burn, any variance of the deck, is going to be Chain Lightning. You're going to want to have 4 of this card, just like Lightning Bolt. Essentially, it is the exact same card, except that it's a sorcery, and it can have the downside of being duplicated by the opponent, but that is a rarity, and so essentially you're just going to use it directly to the face of the opponent, just like Lightning Bolt. Again, the third card that does the exact same thing, Lava Spike, except it doesn't exactly hit creatures, but like we talked about, there's not much of a need to be aiming at creatures unless it is such a detrimental creature that it needs to be hit by something like Lightning Bolt or Chain Lightning, or the next burn spell that we're going to see here, Rift Bolt, can hit players or creatures as well. And so we have 4 of this card. Essentially, we have 16 of the exact same card in our deck. And Rift Bolt being a unique one in that it has a mana cost of 3, so it does get around certain types of decks like Counterbalance and Miracles, and so it has the unique effect of paying 1 and suspending it, putting it in exile, and letting it go off at the beginning of your next upkeep, and so you then can do 3 damage to a creature or player. What a wonderful idea for a deck when you have every card almost doing the exact same thing, and so that's what we're aiming for here in Burn. We don't like getting ruled or getting beaten by other decks, so the rule of 4 is what we're going to pay attention to next, and basically the rule of 4 goes with the idea of 2 for 4, and that's the way I like to think about it. And so we have Fire Blast as the kill spell. You want to save this one until the very end, where you can sacrifice 2 of your mountains, not having to pay 6 mana, and then just deal 4 damage directly at instant speed to a creature or player. Again, you're most of the time just going to be throwing this at your opponent. Again, the rule of 2 for 4, Price of Progress fits in, and except it doesn't exactly do 4 damage. Many times it's pretty safe to assume that this thing is going to do at least 4 damage because of the format. The format is so diluted with non-basic lands, not just the 10 dual lands, but we've got decks like lands or other types of decks that play non-basic lands. Even combo decks, play City of Traders or Boseiju, and so we've got so many other lands that are being in the format that this card will rarely go away without hitting the opponent for something. And so many times I also like to employ this card, the rule of 2 for 4. I really love, because Flame Rift, 4 damage to each player for only 2 mana. So I really love using this card, even though it's not always seen in many burn variants from time to time. And then this last card, which is my favorite spice of the deck, and this is the whole reason why the deck has its nickname of Revel in the Burn, because people always say, why is that card in the burn deck? Especially when they go Game 1 Chalice of the Void, or Game 1 Leyline, or whatever it may be that they thought they were teching me out on, and I go, well, sorry about that, but I guess I'm just going to hit you and then even burn you and destroy whatever piece they thought they were going to get away with. So again, it's my favorite little spice for this deck, and it's the whole reason why I even play, you'll see, green in this deck, is because of this card in this deck. For enchantment side, we've got a few different enchantments that we're going to take a look at real quick. Sulfuric Vortex, perhaps the most popular of them in the burn lists that you'll look at. You usually want to play between 2 or 3. You don't really want to get 4 of these cards in your deck because the mana cost is 3. But this card will absolutely save your life versus so many decks that play life gain. And whether they're playing Swords to Plowshares or whether it's Batterskull or Umezawa's Jit, you just really need this card to stop whatever your opponent is trying to do against you to gain life. So this card will really help out. And then we have Pyrostatic Pillar. You know, Pyrostatic Pillar is one of those older cards that didn't really see much play in these types of decks. I've been running this card for quite a long time, and I can just say with absolute surety that this card is a powerhouse, and relatively undervalued powerhouse of a card because of the fact that this card was put on a creature and then everybody ran 4 of it. But I really love running this card as a 2 of, in addition to, you'll see here in a minute, what I have in my creatures section. Now in the creatures we've got Grim Lavamancer. This is one of the perhaps more popular cards in terms of red creatures that are played in the decks. We've got one in our deck right here, and I like playing it as a 1-of finisher. It's more of a flex position to where I can choose. Maybe I don't want to see this card in every game that I play, but from time to time this card is very well positioned versus certain matchups, so I do want to run one of those. And then I have 4 Eidolon of the Great Revels. You know that card Pyrostatic Pillar we mentioned? Well, this is Pyrostatic Pillar on a stick of a creature. Now this card is just a powerhouse versus any type of storm deck, any type of deck that loves to play low converted mana cost spells. That's why I run essentially 6 of this card in my deck, because there are just so many things in Legacy that cost 3 mana or less. And lastly, we have Goblin Guide. If you're going to be playing Legacy Burn in your life, you really can't play it without this card right here. This card is an absolute powerhouse for red creatures, absolutely essential. You need 4 of this card. It has a minor downside in that many times your opponent may just get a land out of their deck, but normally it's worth it because this card will do, for 1 red mana, it will hit 2, maybe even 3 times, and that adds up for 6 damage for 1 mana. Really, it can make all the difference in winning or losing the game. In terms of lands in the deck, what you'll often want to see is that you're going to want to have fetch lands when you play a mono red burn deck. And that might seem a little paradoxical, a little bit strange, but I assure you, you're going to want to have enough of these to filter out your lands, because you don't want to draw lands after lands after lands. You want to be able to draw into spells, because the spells are what are ultimately going to be what win you the game. We have mountains in our deck, and my version right here, I run 8 in order to filter out, just obviously you got to have mountains if you're going to be able to play red burn. And then my favorite spice of the deck in terms of the lands is that I run 1 Taiga for that 1 main deck destructive Revelry. These things will really come in handy when you can fetch it at just the appropriate time in order to play that spell. So it really comes in handy. For the sideboards, we've got a lot of interesting tech to go over here, so let's get started with the fact that I hate artifacts and enchantments that destroy mono-red burn decks. And no matter what the mono-red hate may be that somebody may play, whether they're playing Chill, whether they're playing Leyline of Sanctity, whether they're playing Chalice of the Void, this card right here I absolutely love, because most times they'll put their Chalice on 1, or most times, they'll think they're getting away with their Chill and you've got nothing to come back with. Well, friends, that's why you play Crowsand Grip, to say, sorry to ruin your hopes and dreams, but you're still going to die from burn. And that's why we have things like Ancient Grudge as well, because again, we destroy those pesky little artifacts that come into our field and do us harm to mess up our game plan. Our game plan is hit the opponent in the face repeatedly, and Smash to Smithereen gets it. It destroys the artifact and it hits the player in the face, and that's exactly what we're aiming for. And so, lastly, we have Destructive Revelry. That favorite card in the main deck. I even run 1 of this, and then the sideboard, I run 2 of this card because it is such a powerful card. In terms of what it can do, it destroys not just artifacts, which is common among red, but it destroys enchantments, and that is makes all the difference in the world when you're playing against enchantments that are just so hateful to the burn plan that we're aiming to destroy the opponent with. The second version of my sideboard, if you will, is what I call blue bad. Because when you're teaching your children as they grow up, you always want to teach them this very simple rule that blue bad. Doesn't matter if blue is their favorite color. Doesn't matter how much they really love to see blue. You teach them from a young age so that when they grow old, they won't forget that blue players typically think they're better than others, typically think that they can counter everything, but I assure you, that's why we play Exquisite Firecraft, because blue bad. Blue wants to stop you from playing Exquisite Firecraft, but Exquisite Firecraft says, no, you're going to get hit for 4 miracles. You're going to get hit for 4, Delver, thinking you can counter everything. All right, well, let's go ahead and think that, think again, Mr. Jace the Mind Sculptor. Think again, Mr. Miracles, that you can counter everything, because we're playing Red Elemental Blast to hit the opponent, and yet to counter whatever they're trying to counter us, and to hit whatever they're, maybe they've got some type of a counterbalance on the field, thinking they're pretty sly, and, maybe this won't do the job, and maybe we're just a little bit too hopeful, but, you got to play this card anyway because blue bad. And then lastly, we've got Pyroblast. Again, same principle as Red Elemental Blast, blue bad. As much blue hate as you can have, friends. That's what you're going to want to put when you have a mono red deck, because blue and red just typically, I don't know why, they don't get along, but you know what? That's why we understand our logic rules. Very simple. Blue bad. Teach your children when you're young. Lastly, we've got sideboards for things such as etc. hate. And this is where you can cram all the goodies that you want to put in your deck for the sideboard. I love putting in things like Pithing Needle because, frankly, I hate dying to lands. And this is what this card comes in and says, you know what, I agree. And that's why he has an Elder Wand, and he says, I'm going to destroy that silly little land that thinks he can turn into a 20/20. And then we've got things such as Pyroclasm that says, you know what, I know that you guys just love dumping out goblins on turn 1, but, sorry, all those goblins go away. And then we've got things such as Surgical Extraction because, Dredge, unfortunately, loves to just pump things out of the graveyard, and this card says, well, no, you're not going to do that, and it's just going to take every one of those copies out of the graveyard. Doesn't really affect it too much to the point where it's going to perhaps win you the game, but it might give you just enough time that you need in order to burn the opponent down to the ground where they, like to stay out and dredge. And then we've got Spell Shock, which is the most shocking part of the deck in the sideboard, and I really love it because people get quite a shock when they see this card. It's one of those cards that is not seen at all when you talk about things in the sideboard that are a little bit spicy, but this card will make all the difference when you're playing against decks like such as Combo or Alurin or whatever other deck thinks that they're all that and more. Well, Spell Shock says, go ahead. Just play your spells. I don't care. Because the more spells they play, you're just going to hold back your Fire Blast in hand. You're just going to hold back all of your instant speed burn spells, and they're just going to do just enough to themselves in the face that you say, well, now you're going to get hit in the face from me. And so, this card is a really fun one to play. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed. This has been Red Green Burn, and aka Revel in the Burn at our second deck tech for Legacy. Thanks for watching, guys.